Well, hello there, everyone. Here to show you the Christmas Jesus holiday calendar activity right here. And basically, that what I went and worked right here is a sketch right here. You have right here is Jesus, and as well as like a for the other parts, for the story of like say for Bethlehem, and if it's like maybe if it's the shepherd, or if it's like anything such as if it's that for like for any other, it's like it's like the between Bethlehem and then if it's like anything to do with that with like Mary and Joseph, those type of of course from the actual work of like from the birth of Christ. So and basically that. Knowing that I'm like that I did not look up too many pictures of just to get an idea about the whole story about about Jesus, and but only had known about I'm like that with a lot of the work that of course I've done from over the years, and just thinking about that do one about the birth of Christ, and around Christmas time, that knowing about that for the whole season of Christmas, that more likely represent the gift and the giving and the love, and as well as they being together, that type of stuff. But and as well as like it's some that may say that that they're between Hanukkah and Christmas time, it's like knowing about the type of holidays, it's like for what we celebrate, and then for what holiday for, it's like what to give and sharing love, that type of stuff. But basically that if anybody wonders that I'm like that this activity right here that talk about right here is that since I was a kid, that a lot of times that going to a church event, that I would a lot of times that it was during the time of the church services, a lot of times that whenever the preacher was talking, that sometimes that my parents, at a lot of times that they would to say that if you get too bored, and they would not want me to bring a Game Boy or anything like that to the church, but a lot of times it was anything to do with maybe drawing paper, pencil and drawing paper, just to keep me entertained. And I can say that my artwork, of course, did not look too much like this. Of course, from back about those years ago, that it was used with like a pencil, kind of like this right here, to where I would just draw a few works of art, and didn't have a whole lot of color. But on the other hand, that the other works of art that I have done that I know were pretty impressive, but then I say that for being in art class and just thinking about for what's required, that really that kind of puts me on a situation to where well, it's not good enough, and like I didn't learn from an art class. It's like it was a hobby at first, until trying to make it, like say trying to earn like a degree for a career with it. But on your hand that you have right here is like a example right here of some people, and just thinking about them, like that if anybody like kids, if they were to be drawing anything, and thinking that necessarily that with anything that they could be drawing, that I would rather work with from a coloring book, that way it's the people or the characters, the shepherds, or whoever that let's say for a whole person, say for the people, say from Bethlehem, it is that knowing about for the birth of Christ, and knowing that you have right here is like a example right here of say for baby Jesus. And if we wonder that, I'm like well, what does it necessarily mean to where that whenever we put up when we put up a tree, and then we put presents underneath, and I don't know, I'm like, really, if that has anything to do with just the way it's arranged about from where Christ was laid when after he was born, to where that did they have him in like a little casket or something like that. And then if most of us can remember that those couple years ago, as far as I can remember, that a lot of times that when we drive by maybe a churches or anything like that they would have like you say like these I don't know if you call them like I say shacks or something like that, or biscuits or something like that they would be kind of like this right here, to where I guess you call them majors. It's like for any type of mangers. that I guess that's back nearly 2,000 or so years ago. I guess that's kind of like what they call them. I guess a major, manger was more likely something to where they for where most babies were born, to where back nearly 2 or 3,000 years ago that they call majors. They call them majors. That a manger. And I'm like, yeah, it's like trying to get it all. It's like, other than major, it's manger. But with mangers, that knowing that they would actually have them to where if there was a kid that was born, and then thinking that, that this is where the kid was born, and then if they, I guess if they had anything back then to where they were able to measure about, how much does the baby weigh, and I don't know. I'm like, at the time, wonder that whenever Jesus was born, like in a manger, that thinking about, that they find out, I'm like, about how much did Jesus weigh? I'm like, whenever Jesus, baby Jesus, whenever he was born, that knowing that, if he weighed about maybe 7 pounds and maybe 15 ounces or something like that, but on their hand, that if any kids were thinking about, I'm like, you would like just work with a few colors, from a coloring book or something like that. But then this right here is I went and drew all this right here. A number of reasons. It's like, really just to see how far I would be able to, just to kind of, be creative. A lot of times, it's like that's, since I was growing up, I was like, that working with like a disability. I had problems reading and writing as well, but then one of the things that I tried to manage was how far I would get if I would actually draw something freehand. So, which I think it's pretty good. The way sometimes that there are some times to where something does wind up not turning out so great, or you try to manage it the best you can to where hey, I'm like, it didn't turn out that good. I'm like, well, do I still want to use it? But on the hand that you have right here is like a manger right here, to where that you have a, like, if anybody were to ask, it's like which one is Mary, which one is Joseph, and then maybe the shepherd or something like that. But on your hand that you have right here these people right here, and then these could be like I don't know, about maybe 10 or more people that would be around in the manger, to where that after Christ was born, that they would lay him down, and then thinking about that reminds me of that song from back in that Christian song, to where that I'm like, for around Christmas time, to where like, away in a little manger the little born Jesus laid down on sweet hay, or something like that. I'm sure most of us can remember a few of the other Christian songs. Is that if it's anything like the little born Jesus lay down, and then if some of us ever heard of Mary had a little lamb, but on your hand that knowing about understand, but I say for between Mary and Joseph, that you have right here is with like a little sheep, a little lamb right here. And I'm like, well, anybody like really that I'm sure, I don't think that they were really, the pets of Christ. I'm like, did Jesus have any pets? I'm like, well, they were just, animals, as far as I know, they were just animals. But you got right there as an example right there of like, I think he was either a sheep or a llama or something like that was with Jesus. And thinking about, while I was drawing this, I'm like, I was not looking at no pictures or nothing. I was just like, well, do I want to go ahead and draw Jesus right here, and then go ahead and add like a little example right there of a manger or something in the background. But anyway, talk about right here is like at the birth of Christ. And knowing for most of the time, it's like when we were to celebrate the holidays, it's thinking about really that a lot of times, I'm sure anybody, or I should say that, sometimes that people often, tend to, to argue and fight about money, or if it's about, arrangements, or if it's about anything such as maybe traveling, or if it's going to be anything related to, like it's almost every year around the holiday season that knowing about that for like around Christmas time, to where that there's going to be issues, and one of those issues will going to be about, it's like, that somebody gets something, and then they're thinking about, well, you want to trade or something like that, exchange gifts, and I'm sure, I'm like, I don't know if anybody here has ever experienced that. I think a couple of times, from the past 2 years, I would probably say that, that on your hand, that if, somebody wanted to trade, exchange gifts with somebody else because maybe they weren't very happy with what they had or something like that, they asked to trade it for something else, or, which I'm sure anybody has had that, has had that experience, to where that, for, you get somebody something, and then, like, well, we can take it back and get you something else if you want, or if you need it. But the way I think about it, though, is that with most of the time, whenever we buy stuff, that that really, that back nearly 2,000 years ago, was that really an option, to where you buy yourself, buy somebody some mittens, and then it's like, well, you take it, you can't take it back because I made it. So it's like a lot of ways that knowing about anybody that may wonder, that I'm like, well, that it's something that was maybe homemade, and then it's like, it's like, well, it may not be the right size either, but please try it on, or something like that. But the way I think about it, though, is that with working right here is like with these sketches right here, working right here with the crayon, and if anybody were to think that I'm like, that about maybe like a little bit of work with the pen, as well, to where I'm like, it's maybe a little bit about the same. I might go ahead and draw a little bit of the clothes that more likely that Jesus will be wearing right here, but knowing about your hair right here is like a little lamb example right here. I guess you say of a lamb, like a little sheep, or if it's a goat or something like that. But anyway, draw a little bit of the legs right here, the pants of the legs. If Jesus were to be sitting down, and maybe not on a throne or something like that. But anyway, but talking about the whole meaning about about the birth of Christ, though, is that if we usually a lot of times we normally see it's like for Christmas decorations, and if anybody wonders like where's the rest of the body of the lamb, I'm like, well, I guess the way I enjoy it, it's kind of tucked in to the clothes of Jesus right there. But anyway, I'll go ahead and draw right here. I'm like, I only provided maybe a few colors here, so I'll go ahead and add it right here for like the part say of Jesus. But anyway, I can say anybody that and I can remember that between learning, listening to the pastor, listening to the preacher talking, and compared to keeping myself busy with drawings, and which I'm sure anybody will probably say that you go to any church events, that more like that that they ask, it's like, please listen to the preacher for what they got to say. They're talking about rehearsing, such as anything that they're talking about, of course, a session about the Bible, and then of course about Christ, and about anything such as son of same like part portions of the Bible that more likely that they'll be talking about, is that thinking that that please listen to the pastor, and I can say that whenever I was young, that I can remember that almost a lot of Sundays, it's like that go to church, and then your parents will be like, anybody that I was with would be like, a couple times, even whenever I went to church, it was just me there, and then thinking about, I'm like, that with the preacher, that if anybody were to wonder that, why is it that you think that the preacher is so boring, for whatever that they talk about, a lot of times that it seems that, some may say that, the pastor over there at the church, he was quite boring, because a lot of times, he was talking about something about some event going on at the church, or maybe if it's donations, or if it's if most of us can remember the offering as well, and knowing about, I'm like, yeah, that whenever we put money in the offering, and I know that nowadays, I don't know how they do it nowadays, to where if anybody were to think that if there was money that you wanted to put in the offering, and let's just say that if you wanted to use a credit card or a gift card, and thinking about, well, I'm sorry, you can't put that in there. And I can remember that I don't think I've told anybody that is that I can remember whenever I was at the church one time. I think I was somewhere, and apparently the snack machine, I was trying to get a snack on the machine, and apparently that the machine would not take my dollar bill. It was all wrinkled, and it would not go into the machine. I was trying to buy, I think I was trying to buy a soda at the time or something like that, and I can remember that I still had the dollar bill in my hand, I think in my pocket. It was in my wallet at the time, but I had it in my pocket, and then it was like, the offering's coming around, if you want to go ahead and put something in the offering, and like, oh, okay, well, because I can remember a couple of times whenever I was young that I would put something in the offering. It was sometimes it was only maybe worth about 57 cents or something like that, maybe about 13, 15 cents, something like that. But then they're like, back then that they're like, you're too young, to put no coupons or money, or if it's checks or anything like that, but credit cards, but it's like, that whenever the offering comes around, I'm sure that they say that if you don't have anything to put in the offering, that's fine. Just pass it along. The next person who's in the road. But the way I think about, though, is that with the offering note, whenever there's a time for whenever the offering comes around, that a lot of times with most churches, that sometimes it only takes about maybe between 10 and 15 minutes for them to pass the offering around. If you want to go ahead and give a little bit of money, or if it's which I don't know if anybody has experienced it, to where that they've seen a few things in the offering, to where that if anybody want to donate maybe candy, I'm like, if anybody like, no, don't be putting no lollipops, or don't be putting no candy bars in the offering. It's like, that for Kids for Hunger. I'm like, well, Kids for Hunger that would more likely enjoy some candy, but I don't know. I don't really know if the offering would more likely accept candy. I had not tried it before, but I could suggest anybody who's ever, a preacher at a church will more likely say that that candy, I don't think is going to be accepted. So, candy, or if it's going to be maybe a recipe, if anybody wanted to share a nice, delicious recipe for cornbread or something like that, or maybe if it's a wheat, lasagna, gourmet, or something like that. I'm like, some things that more likely the offering would not take. But on your hand, that you have right here is an example right here of like for Jesus, and if we were thinking about being a shepherd or somebody like that. But on your hand, the way I think about it, though, is like drawing these people, and I can say that my artwork nearly 10 or 12 years ago looked something kind of like this, but then on your hand, that anybody like wondering that between working with the coloring book and actually drawing the people, and even though that they don't look like the actual people, it's like from Bethlehem, that knowing about about the birth of Christ, and then as well as about what Jesus Jesus whenever he was born. But on your hand, that I'm like, as soon as maybe I add just a little bit more detail to it, a lot of times I try to manage it to where I add just a little bit more detail, and that's usually how I think about it. What's works the best is to where that while we're sketching something, is just to put a little bit more work to it. Keep working hard and put a little bit more talent to it. See how it goes. So, in a lot of ways, that I keep thinking about, about Jesus here, that I'm like, looking at no pictures, and just put a little bit of color, and sketching the outfit, or if he like anybody say that like a gown or a robe, But on the other hand, that knowing about, I'm like, yeah, to make him look a little bit like Noah, the one that built the ark, but. And I can go ahead and add a little bit of blue right here. But anyway, but talking about, it's like for any offerings, but for how we celebrate Christmas though, is to where that some that may think that for what they a lot of times that when they celebrate it is that to where that about doing the Christmas shopping, doing the gift giving, and as well as if one of those could be, it's like for like the meals and stuff. And I'm sure. Some kids, it's like whenever I was a kid, I just about the same thing. Every year around Christmas time, something to play with, such as something to look forward to. That they want a toy, they want that they want maybe clothes, that they want presents. But then for the adults, it's like they may say that I actually want a hot pretzel, or I want some biscuits, or I want some eggnog or something like that. I like to go ahead and go into the kitchen, for the food, and I'm sure if most of us can remember, if it reminds us of maybe another family member or a friend, to where that they would bring if it was anything, such as, homemade, if it's, for any other special type of tradition, to where if it's going to be ham, or if it's going to be roast, pot roast, or if it's going to be anything such as maybe soups or anything like that, or if it's going to be anything for any other type of special tradition, to where for between the cooking and then the treats and stuff like that. So if anybody wonders that between what they usually see on the dinner table around Christmas time, the cookies, the peanut butter cookies and the pecan cookies, and like the cookies and then the brownies. So I'm like, I say that that sometimes around Christmas time, a lot of times it's between the M&Ms and then if it's going to be the pecans, or if it's the chocolate chip and then raisin, the raisin cookies. And so in a lot of ways that knowing about with the holidays, that we could probably say that we keep, I'm sure most of us keep pretty busy around the holidays. So as far as it's like for about it's like we have right here is Jesus. So it's like to celebrate about the the birth of Christ, and it's like for happy birthday Jesus, and then thinking about exactly about knowing about that. If anybody were to do the study, to where that at the time, I'm like wondering that I've also heard it before, to where that if anybody were to be heard it, to where anybody who was born on Christmas, to where they would get less presents. And there may be some people here that may wonder that. I'm like, that's simple. I'm like, for anybody who was born on Christmas or on Christmas Eve, that more likely they're like, it's an easy consensus that it's birth of Christ, and thinking that there basically if there's a rule about that, to where it's Christ's birthday, so you get less presents than anybody else, but then on your hand too, that you may get a little bit more of the treatment, the attention or something like that. I don't know if that could maybe be the rule in the Bible, to where if you were born on Christmas Day or on Christmas Christmas Eve or Christmas, or the day after Christmas, something like that, or maybe around New Year's, that they say they had that the rule, to where that they would celebrate that way, to where you can't. You can't have your snackies at a certain time, or you have to have your dessert last, or something like that. So I'm sure that thinking that anybody who was born around Christmas time, or if it could have been anything that was forgiven, that to where that and some that may say having to work with, like you say, that if you were going to be spending Christmas time maybe with somebody, maybe the in-laws, and thinking about that, you're like the newsome person, but then that the family of about maybe 3 or 4 children, and thinking that for who deserves how many presents. And so it's like a lot of times that really is that really about the whole meaning about about Christ's birthday, to where really, if anybody knows about the study about Bethlehem, is like about the it's like for a whole part about the birth of Christ, where did Jesus have any brothers or sisters? Did he have any cousins? But the way I think about it, though, is like understanding about the birth of Christ. That a lot of my artwork that I'm doing right here is basically showing. It's like, do I think that maybe I can go ahead and add, like, I can more likely be working on this almost all day. It's like, just like if anybody were thinking that, the TV that more likely keeps us entertained, or maybe the radio that keeps us entertained, but a lot of times it's like, it's, the artwork, my artwork, that a lot of times I, have a lot of fun. I can remember, I still have some of those art programs, like if most of us can remember, from our, Art Alive, and as well as, for like, Wacky Worlds, from the Genesis console, Microsoft Paint, those programs that I can remember playing, since I was a kid, and like, thinking about, that between board games and working with art, that I could probably say that I could maybe spend 5 hours to maybe close to 8 hours, working on it, such as that knowing about the different, sketches and stuff that I can work with. And some that may think about, it's pretty difficult, because on your hand, let's just say that there may be some that may think that, they don't, they, like, it's hard to draw the people, and then especially that it's hard to be able to focus on it. It's like, how to draw the details about, about the beard and then the clothes, and it's like so it's, and then the animals. And I'm sure that anybody like thinking about, if I want to go ahead and use right here as a pen this time, but I at the time I'm like wondering that about what does about Jesus, he's got a horse, and thinking about that with the white horse you got right here's the white horse right here. You got the white horse, and with the white horse, go ahead and draw just a little bit of hair right here along with the ears. And like thinking that like you with the white horse, and I know with the lamb, and then as well as like with a few of the other animals that we may see. It's like for the the shepherds, but anyway, but you got right there is a horse right here, and I can go ahead and add in right here, like the horse. But anyway, you got right there is a horse right there, and I don't know. I'm like for any other animals, I'm like anybody say looks kind of like a camel. Though I'm like maybe a little bit like a camel, but on your hand now I'm like it's for a horse. But anyway. I guess not really hair, but it's fur. A little bit of fur. But anyway, but you got right there's a horse, and then as well as with the clothes right there, I'm like, I can maybe go on for quite some time about the draw right here, but just thinking that if anybody don't know too much, or just get a few lessons about how to draw something free-handed, it's like usually that I get able to get some really good progress if I get some ideas by looking, reviewing some pictures and getting an idea about exactly about between the shepherd and the throne, or if it's going to be anything such as that if like anybody say from Bethlehem, but then just knowing about that the whole purpose about about the birth of Christ is that knowing about really about put up a Christmas tree. And thinking about for what the meaning about the whole spirit of Christmas, to where that exactly about like, well, we put up a Christmas tree. Well, did Jesus have a Christmas tree? But it's like so far as about what they had in the manger. But on your hand that you have right here, and then you have right there, it's like a little bit space right there. But I'll go ahead and I say that draw like a star. Draw a star on a Christmas tree. If most of us can remember, it's like from the Grinch that stole Christmas. It's like But anyway, got there's a detail right there of a Christmas tree. And like, yeah, whose idea was it? It must have came back about 200 or so years ago, to where every year around Christmas time that we would put up the tree and the decorations. But the way I think about it, though, is really is the tree supposed to, is the Christmas tree and decorations and presents underneath the Christmas tree, is that supposed to be like an idea, to where that does it necessarily represent anything? Like that I don't know. If anybody were to say that between a Christmas tree and a wreath, and I know some that may say that around Christmas time, especially, that they would that they probably don't want to deal with the trouble of putting up, getting up on top of the roof and then putting up Christmas lights and working with all the other decorations, and thinking that especially around the holidays, that if they take the extra time just to be able to put up the Christmas decorations, especially decorate the house, but the gingerbread man, that type of stuff. But the way I think about it, though, is that knowing that some that may say they put up they go ahead and just work that out to where they put up a wreath instead of going through all that trouble to where getting the Christmas tree out and setting up the Christmas tree. And maybe that some that may think that you didn't have too much money, so didn't have too much money that year, so you just decided to just go ahead and maybe you just made a few gingerbread men, and then you bought maybe a few decorations to put you send out Christmas cards. And I'm sure anybody that are like thinking, well, that's usually what I do. There may be some people that may just send out Christmas cards. It's like, hand out Christmas cards and work Christmas cards. Work the Christmas cards. But other than that, for knowing about the right or wrong way of how to celebrate the holidays, that knowing about that one of those things will be say that just like I can remember that a couple of times I talked to Santa. I'm like, anybody wondering that really that ain't Christmas supposed to be about Jesus? I'm like, where did Santa Claus come from? I'm like, but then on the other hand, the way I think about though, that may be a whole different story too, about really what is the difference between Santa Claus and Jesus. And if any kids wonder that, I'm like, really that well, Jesus don't have all that red clothes. And I'm like, Jesus, he don't really have a big waist. And I'm like, Jesus has a beard, but then it's like a brown color. I'm like, but on the other hand, I'm like, for the story about Saint Nicholas, and as well as the story about Frosty the Snowman, I'm like, well, really, that can we really explain to why that between the elves and then along with Jesus and as well as Santa Claus, it's like, really, can we explain to where Santa's birthday, I'm like, well, we all think about maybe that back nearly 2,000 or 3,000 years ago, to where if this person was what you call is like if they were, and then some that may say, is it really hard to explain or what? To where that I'm like, really, what is the difference between them? To where that really that Santa Claus basically delivers, but then on your hand to Jesus, basically he was born on Christmas Day, and leave it at that. But then some that may say, oh well, wait a minute, with Jesus though, it's like with Jesus that he basically says you die on a cross, and as well as that and other things too. But it's like for understanding about the whole purpose about the holidays, to where that if we were to think about well, the elves are the helpers, right? But then on the other hand too, well, what about Santa Claus? I'm like, Santa Claus, does he keep a list, between who's naughty or nice? And as well as, about Santa Claus, that with Santa Claus, that, if he was not born on Christmas Day, to where that knowing about, I'm like, really, about, that, well, what kind of magic do you think that you'll be able to pick up from Santa Claus? So it's like, the difference between Jesus and Santa Claus, they're like, oh, well, actually that, at the time, I'm like wondering that, really about, does Jesus, does Santa Claus, have a major? Does Santa Claus, does Santa Claus have a major? And then on your hand too, besides, wearing the red, I'm like, it'll kind of give him like, which says like a green suit or something like that, and on your hand too, does Jesus have a bag full of presents? So it's like, really, that reminds me of the game, that I can remember playing on the Genesis console, to where there was I cannot remember the name. I don't know if anybody here can remember the name of that game, to where that I know, if I can remember right, I think it was either on the Super Nintendo or the Sega Genesis. I think it was on the Sega Genesis, but where Jesus, I can actually draw right here just to kind of show everybody that it was a game. I can't remember the name of this game, but real quick I can just draw an example. But it would be, if I can remember right, it was on the Genesis. That, Jesus would be at about like this right here. He would be riding like a little horse right here. And you would, during the game, that you would be, taking the controls to where that, you would help find, you would help Jesus, find, Mary, I think, find Joseph. I don't know. That may not have been Jesus. I'm like, if anybody has played that game before, if it was maybe, somebody like maybe a shepherd or something like. I think during the game that, if I can remember right, that that might not even been Jesus right there on the camel or on the horse, but just knowing about exactly who it was that was on the horse, that basically meant is like you to deliver presents to the baby Jesus or something like that. But the name of the game, which I don't recall the name of it, but I think it was about the great story of Jesus or something like that. But if I can remember right, it was on the on the Sega Genesis. If I can remember right, on the Sega Genesis. So it's like for the Sega Genesis, it's like it was on the Sega Genesis. It was I cannot recall the name of the game, but then I can just kind of explain about maybe some of the details, because I never did have it. And I tell you one thing that I could probably say that I don't recall any game stores, any game stores that sell old games, any old Sega games, that I do not recall seeing it anywhere on the shelves. That I've seen almost every other game that I can remember playing, such as if it's going to be maybe Street Fighter or other games that it's like games like Jeopardy and stuff like that. But then one game that basically talks about what Jesus, though, that I can remember playing the game. But then I'm like, then did you ever beat it and go to the level 2 and level 3 or level 4? I'm like, no, I played it a little bit, but at the time, I'm like, well, really, that if I can remember right, somebody told me one time that that they played the game, they played the game in its entirety one time, and then they can remember that it was at the end of the game that I'm like, I can't really spoil it right now to everybody, but I'm like, I have not beat the game, and it's been a while since I played the game. Don't even remember the name of the game, but from what I can remember, that somebody told me that it was like the lady and then the guy that that were connected, and he said that I love you or something like that. So far as I love you, but anyway, that was just that was a game that I can remember playing around Christmas time, because a lot of times anybody would think that especially around Christmas holiday, that more like that they would see be seen between understanding about the whole reason about the birth of Jesus, about the birth of Christ, is just thinking about for what's underneath the Christmas tree. So it's like that you keep entertained with whatever presents that come from the Christmas tree, and be like exactly that toys for the kids to play with for at least a year to maybe 6 months, and thinking that by next year what do you think is going to be on the Christmas list. So it's like, really, if anybody's ever asked for it, it's like the whole understanding about everybody say that well, besides, we heard that song between, it's I'll be home for Christmas or something like that. And I'm sure there's been other stories to where if it's going to be, somebody who's returning, from a war or something like that, or somebody had to be away from, from home for the holidays, that more likely, that there's plenty of gifts, I'm sure, to cheer anybody up. It's especially on a, for the greeting cards, to where I'm returning home. That, I have not been doing too much, greeting card shopping here lately, but if any of us, have seen those greeting cards, which I know I haven't seen them, but that was just an idea about, any cards that show about, returning troops, anybody who's returning, from an overseas trip, from a war, or if it's anything, related to if they were gone, if they were somewhere else, if they had to attend somewhere, due to a job, to a project, to a duty, or anything like that. And thinking about, if they say that, we'll promise to be home around the holidays, but it's around Christmas time, to where, and I'm sure that anybody, like I say, if they're going to be traveling, especially around the holidays, being, what's it like, to be, stuck at the airport. And I'm sure almost every year that, even though nowadays that they have it to where, most airports that if they're going to be traveling around the holidays, that thinking about, hey, that there's wireless there, and there's places where you can still shop at, and even though, even if it's between 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning, if there's going to be about maybe 2 or 3 feet of snow on the ground, and a lot of times that knowing about, the Christmas plans had to be postponed, just because of, it's snowing outside, and people, it's harder for them to get around because of the snow. So a couple of times before, about 3 or 4 years ago, I can remember, I'm anybody who's traveling around the holidays, that they encourage them to drive safely, please, and on your hand, that with the holidays, that the holidays, I guess, are going to come. It's for sooner or later, knowing about, even though if they run right around the 25th or so of Christmas Day is on the 25th of December, and then thinking about, maybe not everybody's going to have all their holiday shopping, done yet, or if it's going to be, the weather that kind of delayed a lot of things. So the stuff that maybe that we cannot help either, to where that, it's it's the weather's going to delay this, or, church service had to be canceled, due to the weather. And I'm sure that has happened a couple of times, to where that, maybe a few events that could not go on, at the church, or maybe around Christmas time, due to the fact because of the weather. But, anybody think about it, especially the meteorologist, can probably say you encourage anybody, please, to drive safely, have a nice, safe holiday. And even though if you cannot be there right at the time because, something else that came up, or if it's that the weather that you had to delay a few things. So, like talking about that, with if there's going to be snow on the ground, that really, I say, really, did Jesus have to deal with that? I'm like, whenever he was born, I'm like, was there about 3 feet of snow on the ground whenever he was born over his manger? And then, did they wrap him up in a blanket? But, I'm sure that there's a lot of questions that more likely remain about that, about Jesus, that, did they have him wrapped up in a blanket, and that, that, all that other stuff about, for knowing about, other source questions. But I'm sure that they about the Bible, which I'm sure that they say that there's a, type of story to where that, it's like for baby Jesus, that, born on December, it's 25th December, it's like for Christ's birthday, and as well as, for Easter time. But other than that, I talk about, for the Christmas, Christmas Jesus, as I say, for color activity, and talking about right here, is since I did the artwork a lot of times, anybody that may wonder that whoever that did the artwork, please, if you would, you just sign your name, and just go ahead and sign my name right there, Matthew. But so you go ahead and say say for Matthew. But on your hand that you have right there, I can go ahead and write my full name too. But anyway, right there. Anybody who did the artwork is like, please to sign it, because I'm sure, like I can remember that anybody that says if you do any artwork, especially for the church, they would at least like to, like a, an autograph, whoever that did the artwork, please to sign. And then if I want to go ahead and include the date too, I'm like, today for being for Saturday morning, December the I think 5th, 2015. And like wondering that, yeah, if you want to put the time too, I'm like, yeah, I'll go ahead and put 4:30 a.m. something like that. Let's see here, 4:30, or actually, I can go ahead and put about maybe 10 till it's 10 to 6. So 10 to 10 to 6. So if anybody like thinking about quarter to 6 or something like that. But anyway, but you have right here is like talking about, say, for the for Jesus is like, the story about Jesus right here is talking about with the manger, and as well as it's like with the shepherd, and is what the lamb. It's like to say for Santa Claus. It's like here at the Christmas Jesus, say holiday kind of activity.